On a stormy night, a poor single dad helps a mysterious woman stranded in the rain. Minutes later, 10 black SUVs suddenly surround his small repair shop, and armed men rush toward the door. The rain clouds gathered slowly over the city of Seattle as the evening traffic faded into quiet streets, and inside a small, aging repair shop at the corner of Maple Street, Daniel Brooks wiped the grease from his hands with an old rag. Daniel was a 39-year-old white American mechanic whose life had never been easy, but he carried himself with a calm strength that came from years of responsibility. His short brown hair was slightly messy from a long day of work, and faint lines on his face revealed the weight of struggles he rarely talked about. The shop around him was modest and worn down. Old toolboxes lined the walls, spare car parts filled dusty shelves, and the flickering fluorescent light above his workbench buzzed quietly in the background. It wasn't much, but this little repair shop was everything to him because it was the only thing keeping his small family afloat. 7 years earlier, Daniel's life had been completely different. His wife Emily had been the light of their home, filling every room with warmth and laughter. But a sudden illness had taken her away far too soon, leaving Daniel alone to raise their daughter, Lily. Since that day, Daniel had carried 2 roles in his life, both father and mother. Every morning he woke up before sunrise to prepare Lily's breakfast, braid her curly light brown hair the best he could, and walk her to the school bus before rushing to the repair shop. Lily was only 8 years old, but she understood more about life than most children her age. She never complained when Daniel had to work late, and every evening she greeted him with the same bright smile that somehow made all his exhaustion disappear. That smile was the reason Daniel kept pushing forward, even when business was slow and bills kept piling up. On this particular evening, thunder rumbled faintly across the darkening sky as Daniel finished repairing the engine of an old pickup truck belonging to one of his regular customers. Rain began to fall, softly at first, tapping gently against the shop windows before quickly growing heavier. Seattle storms were unpredictable, and tonight's rain soon turned into a relentless downpour. Daniel stepped outside the shop for a moment and looked up at the gray sky as cold raindrops soaked his worn work jacket. He sighed quietly, knowing he should head home soon, because Lily was probably waiting for him with her homework spread across the kitchen table. But before leaving, Daniel walked back inside to double-check everything in the shop, turning off the lights and locking the tool cabinets one by one. The quiet hum of the rain outside made the place feel even lonelier than usual. Finally, Daniel grabbed his old umbrella and prepared to leave for the night. As he locked the shop door behind him, he glanced down the nearly empty street, where streetlights reflected off the wet pavement like glowing mirrors. It was just another rainy night in Seattle, or at least that's what Daniel believed. What he didn't know yet was that within the next hour, this ordinary evening would lead him to a moment that would change his life forever. The rain had grown heavier by the time Daniel Brooks stepped away from his repair shop and began walking down the quiet Seattle street toward home. Cold wind pushed the rain sideways, and the yellow streetlights reflected off the wet pavement like shimmering pools of light. Daniel pulled his worn jacket closer around him and opened his old umbrella, though the strong wind made it difficult to keep steady. His mind drifted to his daughter Lily, imagining her sitting at the small kitchen table with her homework spread out, probably glancing at the clock every few minutes, waiting for him to return. Lily always tried to stay awake until he came home, no matter how late it was, and Daniel never liked the thought of keeping her waiting. As he continued down the sidewalk, the storm made the neighborhood feel unusually empty. Most people had already rushed home to escape the rain. Cars passed occasionally, splashing through puddles before disappearing into the darkness. But as Daniel approached a dimly lit bus stop near the corner of Pine Avenue, something caught his attention. A woman stood alone beneath the small bus shelter, though it offered almost no protection from the storm. Her long blonde hair was completely soaked, strands clinging to her face as the rain poured down. She wore an elegant dark coat that looked expensive,
the kind of clothing Daniel rarely saw outside of downtown business districts. Despite the cold weather, she seemed more frustrated than frightened, repeatedly pressing the power button on her phone only to stare at the blank screen in disappointment. Daniel slowed his steps as he passed, instinctively sensing that something wasn't right. The woman clearly didn't belong out here in this quiet neighborhood during a storm like this. Her posture and appearance suggested she was someone used to a very different environment: comfortable offices, private cars, and warm buildings far from empty streets and broken bus stops. For a moment, Daniel hesitated, knowing it wasn't really his business. People pass strangers every day without getting involved. But as he watched the woman shiver slightly in the rain, something in his heart refused to let him keep walking. Daniel stopped and turned back toward the bus stop. Approaching carefully so he wouldn't startle her, he lifted his umbrella slightly and spoke in a calm, friendly voice. "Hey, are you all right?" The woman looked up, clearly surprised that someone had stopped to ask. Her gray eyes reflected both relief and embarrassment as she brushed wet hair away from her face. "My car broke down a few miles from here," she explained softly. "My phone died and I've been trying to find a ride or a signal somewhere." Daniel glanced at the empty street and then back at the storm pouring down around them. Waiting here clearly wasn't going to solve her problem. Without thinking twice, Daniel gestured back toward the small street behind him. "My repair shop is just around the corner," he said kindly. "It's not fancy, but it's warm and dry. You can wait there until the rain slows down." The woman hesitated for a brief moment, studying the stranger who had offered to help her. Something about Daniel's honest expression made her feel safe. Finally, she nodded gently. What Daniel didn't realize was that the soaked stranger standing for him was not just any woman. She was Victoria Hale, one of the most powerful CEOs in America, and the storm had just led her straight into the life of a struggling single father. The rain continued to fall steadily as Daniel Brooks unlocked the door to his small repair shop and stepped inside, holding the door open for the woman who had followed him from the bus stop. The warm air inside felt like a welcome relief after the cold storm outside. The shop wasn't impressive by any means. Old shelves stacked with spare car parts lined the walls, toolboxes sat in every corner, and the faint smell of engine oil hung in the air. But it was clean, organized, and clearly cared for. Daniel quickly turned on the lights, which flickered for a moment before illuminating the modest workspace. The woman stepped inside carefully, looking around the room with quiet curiosity. She seemed both surprised and touched that a stranger would open his workplace to help her during a storm. Daniel set his umbrella by the door and offered her a small towel he kept near the sink. "Sorry, it's not much," he said with a humble smile, "but at least it's dry in here." The woman thanked him politely and gently dried the rain from her hair and hands. Daniel then walked toward a small coffee machine sitting on a side table near his desk. It was old and scratched, but it still worked well enough to make a warm drink on cold nights. Within a few minutes, the comforting aroma of coffee filled the shop. Daniel handed her a cup and leaned casually against his workbench, completely unaware of who she really was. "Storm like this usually doesn't last too long," he said calmly. "You'll probably be able to get a ride soon." The woman took a slow sip of the coffee, clearly grateful for the warmth. "Thank you," she replied softly. "You didn't have to do this." Daniel shrugged gently. Helping someone stay out of the rain isn't exactly a big sacrifice. For a moment the two sat quietly while the sound of rain tapped steadily against the shop windows. The woman studied Daniel's face with curiosity. His calm attitude and genuine kindness felt unfamiliar to her. In her world, people often approached her with hidden motives, hoping to gain something from her wealth or influence. But Daniel didn't even ask her name. Instead, he casually began talking about his day, explaining how he had just finished repairing a customer's old pickup truck before the storm arrived. Soon the conversation turned to his daughter, Lily. As Daniel spoke about her, his tired expression softened into a proud smile. He described how Lily loved drawing pictures and how she often sat in the corner of the shop doing her homework while he worked. The woman listened carefully, clearly moved by the quiet devotion in Daniel's voice. She could see that despite his financial struggles, Daniel was deeply devoted to giving his daughter a stable and loving life. For the first time in years, the powerful businesswoman felt completely removed from the world of boardrooms, investors, and corporate competition. Sitting inside that small repair shop, she felt something she rarely experienced anymore: peace.
Daniel continued speaking naturally, unaware that the woman listening to his simple life story was actually Victoria Hale, the billionaire CEO of one of the largest technology companies in the United States. To Daniel, she was simply a stranger who needed shelter from the rain. But outside, the quiet street was about to erupt with flashing headlights and arriving vehicles, signaling that this peaceful moment was about to change in ways neither of them expected. The peaceful sound of rain tapping against the repair shop windows continued as Daniel Brooks leaned against his workbench, finishing his story about Lily's latest school project. Victoria Hale listened with quiet interest, holding the warm coffee cup between her hands. For a brief moment, the world outside seemed far away from the small, humble repair shop. But suddenly, something unusual interrupted the calm atmosphere. A bright flash of headlights spilled across the shop windows, lighting up the entire room. Daniel paused mid-sentence and glanced toward the door in confusion. The quiet street outside was rarely busy at this hour, especially during a heavy storm. Curious, Daniel stepped closer to the window and looked outside. What he saw made his eyebrows lift in surprise. One black SUV had pulled up in front of the shop, then another, and another. Within seconds, 10 large black SUVs lined the street in front of his small building, their headlights cutting through the rain like powerful beams of light. The engines rumbled loudly as the vehicles came to a stop. Daniel blinked in disbelief, trying to understand what was happening. This quiet neighborhood had never seen anything like this before. Before he could say a word, the doors of the SUVs opened almost simultaneously. Several tall men dressed in dark suits stepped out quickly, holding umbrellas as they scanned the area with serious expressions. Their movements were sharp and coordinated, clearly trained. Daniel's heart began to beat faster. Did you call someone?" he asked, turning toward the woman with confusion. Victoria looked toward the window calmly, though a faint look of realization crossed her face. She seemed to understand exactly what was happening. Just then, one of the suited men hurried toward the repair shop door and knocked firmly. The sound echoed through the small room. Daniel hesitated for a moment before walking over and opening it. As soon as the door swung open, the man spoke urgently. "Miss Hale, we've been searching everywhere for you." Daniel froze. The words hung in the air as thunder rolled in the distance. Slowly, Daniel turned his head toward the woman standing behind him. The soaked stranger he had helped earlier now stood quietly in the center of the shop, her calm expression completely different from before. The suited man stepped inside slightly and continued speaking with visible relief. "Your security team has been trying to reach you for hours. When your car broke down and your phone went offline, we lost your location completely." Daniel felt a wave of disbelief wash over him. "Security team?" he murmured under his breath. Victoria stepped forward gracefully and placed her coffee cup down on the workbench. She looked toward Daniel with a warm, almost apologetic smile. "Daniel," she said gently, "I think it's time I explain something." The room suddenly felt very small as several security vehicles idled outside. Rain continued to pour against the windows, but Daniel barely noticed anymore. Victoria straightened slightly and spoke calmly. "My name is Victoria Hale." Daniel's eyes widened instantly. The name sounded familiar, too familiar. Victoria continued softly. "I'm the CEO of Hale Technologies." Daniel stared at her in stunned silence. The woman he had simply helped out of kindness, the woman he had offered coffee to in his small repair shop, was one of the most powerful billionaires in America. And suddenly, Daniel realized this rainy night had just turned into something far bigger than he ever could have imagined. The rain had finally stopped by the time morning sunlight began to spread across the quiet streets of Seattle. Daniel Brooks arrived at his repair shop earlier than usual that day, but his mind was still spinning from everything that had happened the night before. He kept replaying the moment in his head when the suited man had called the woman Miss Hale. The name Victoria Hale was known across the country. Her face had appeared countless times on news channels and business magazines as one of the most powerful female CEOs in America. Yet somehow, the billionaire CEO had been sitting in his small repair shop just hours earlier, drinking coffee from his old machine while listening to him talk about his daughter. Daniel shook his head slightly as he unlocked the shop door, still struggling to believe the whole situation had actually happened.
Once inside, he turned on the lights and started preparing for another ordinary day of fixing engines and checking worn-out parts. Part of him wondered if the entire night had been some strange dream. After all, people like Victoria Hale didn't usually cross paths with struggling mechanics. But just as Daniel picked up a wrench from his workbench, the quiet street outside was interrupted by the smooth sound of a luxury car pulling up. Through the shop window, Daniel saw a sleek black sedan stop in front of the building. His heart skipped slightly as the car door opened. Stepping out with confidence and elegance was the same woman from the night before, Victoria Hale. This time, however, she looked very different. Instead of soaked clothes and tired eyes, she wore a perfectly tailored black business suit that reflected her powerful position. Her long blonde hair was neatly styled, and her calm posture carried the quiet authority of someone used to leading billion-dollar companies. Daniel quickly wiped his hands on a cloth and walked toward the door as Victoria entered the shop with a friendly smile. "Good morning, Daniel," she said warmly. Daniel nodded politely, still slightly unsure how to act around someone so important. "Good morning, Miss Hale." Victoria gently shook her head. "Please, just call me Victoria." Her voice remained calm and sincere. She walked slowly through the repair shop, looking around at the simple space once again. The same worn toolboxes and shelves of spare parts surrounded them, but this time the place seemed even smaller compared to the world she came from. Victoria stopped near Daniel's workbench and turned toward him with a thoughtful expression. "I spent a lot of time thinking about last night," she began. "When my car broke down and my phone died, I suddenly found myself in a situation where no one knew who I was." She paused briefly before continuing. "Do you know how many people walked past me without stopping?" Daniel remained quiet. Victoria smiled gently. "But you didn't. You helped a stranger without asking for anything in return." Daniel shrugged slightly. "It was just the right thing to do." Victoria's expression softened. "That's exactly why I came back." She then revealed that her company was launching a new national initiative designed to support hard-working small business owners across the United States. The program would provide funding, modern equipment, and marketing support to businesses that deserved a chance to grow. Victoria looked directly at Daniel. "And I want your repair shop to be the very first one we support." Daniel stood frozen in shock. The offer sounded almost unreal. Just one day earlier, he had been worried about paying his monthly bills. Now, the CEO of a billion-dollar company was offering to transform his struggling shop into something far greater, and it had all started with one simple act of kindness in the rain. Daniel Brooks stood quietly inside his small repair shop, trying to process the incredible words he had just heard. Victoria Hale, the powerful CEO standing in front of him, had just offered to transform his struggling business into something far greater than he had ever imagined. For a moment, Daniel simply stared at the worn concrete floor beneath his boots, his mind racing with disbelief. Just yesterday, he had been worried about paying the next electricity bill and making sure there was enough food in the kitchen for his daughter, Lily. Now, the woman who ran a billion-dollar company was offering to help him rebuild his future. Daniel slowly looked up at Victoria, searching her face to see if there was any sign that this might be some kind of misunderstanding. But the calm confidence in her expression made it clear she meant every word. Victoria could see the hesitation in his eyes, and she understood exactly why he felt overwhelmed. She had spent years surrounded by people who chased success through money and influence, but Daniel was different. He was a man who measured his life through responsibility, sacrifice, and the simple love he had for his daughter. That was the reason she had returned. Victoria took a few steps around the shop, running her fingers lightly across the old wooden counter near the cash register. She imagined what the place could become with proper resources, new equipment, modern tools, a fresh workspace, and more customers walking through the door. But to her, the most valuable part of the shop was not the building itself, it was the man standing inside it. "Daniel," she said gently, turning back toward him, "I'm not offering charity." Her voice was steady and sincere. "I'm offering a partnership." She explained that her company wanted to launch a national program designed to support honest small business owners who worked hard but never received the opportunities they deserved. Daniel's repair shop would become the first success story of that project. New equipment would be delivered, the building would be renovated, and Victoria's company would promote the shop as part of their nationwide initiative to support local businesses. Daniel felt a deep wave of emotion rise inside him. For years he had struggled alone, believing that no one noticed the quiet effort he put into building a better life for his daughter. Now, someone powerful enough to change his entire future was standing in front of him because of one simple moment of kindness. Daniel finally nodded slowly, accepting the opportunity with gratitude. Later that evening, when Daniel returned home, Lily ran to greet him at the door just like she always did. But this time, Daniel knelt down and hugged her tightly, knowing that their lives were about to change in ways he never expected. Meanwhile, across the city, Victoria sat inside her office overlooking the skyline, thinking about the rainy night that had brought her to a small repair shop. In a world driven by power and profit, one struggling single father had reminded her of something far more valuable, that even the smallest act of kindness can change lives forever.
If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like and subscribe to Drew Daily Stories for more emotional and inspiring stories about kindness, love, and life-changing moments that prove even small actions can change someone's world.